Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans, I will keep pushing for progress on the work that I believe still needs to be done, fixing a broken immigration system.
President Obama did not mention any of his immigration achievements, probably because he's deported twice as many illegal immigrants as George W. Bush did, and he still has a year to go.
How do we make technology work for us and not against us, especially when it comes to solving urgent challenges like climate change?
We do have technology that works. Hydraulic fracturing of shale for natural gas has created an American energy renaissance. But if President Obama's clean power plan is upheld by the courts, that's the end of the Renaissance.
How do we keep America safe and lead the world without becoming its policeman?
It seems a little late for this president to say we shouldn't be the world's policeman. We're still making war in 6 countries, including Iraq and Afghanistan. And that sentiment contradicts what he says later in the speech when he says we need to remake the international system. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it probably involves a lot of new policing.
Our auto industry just had its best year ever. That's just part of a manufacturing surge that's created nearly 900,000 new jobs in the past 6 years. And we've done all this while cutting our deficits by almost 3/4.
Let's give credit where it's due. The success of the U.S. auto industry last year is attributable largely to the operations of foreign nameplate producers operating in right-to-work states, mostly in the American South. U.S. manufacturing broadly has been successful on account of $1 trillion worth of foreign direct investment in the U.S. manufacturing sector. It's odd to see this president citing those statistics, considering his propensity for characterizing trade and investment as a zero-sum game.
The bipartisan reform of No Child Left Behind was an important start, and together we've increased early childhood education, lifted high school graduation rates to new highs, boosted graduates in fields like engineering. In the coming years, we should build on that progress by providing pre-K for all.
The education theme of this speech comes down to one word: more. But more of something that doesn't work isn't a good thing. In K through 12 education, we've gotten more with No Child Left Behind. The new law that is supposed to replace No Child Left Behind has lots of federal involvement. But what we've had throughout the period of federal involvement is lots more money spent, a lot more people employed by schools, employed by governments to do education, but we've seen flat outcomes. In fact, the last 2 years of test scores have been down in the Obama administration. When we talk about pre-K, we have a lot more kids going to pre-K. We have more Head Start centers. But what we also have is a lot more research that shows pre-K has no lasting benefit. So we have a lot more that's being spent on these things, but we're not getting any benefit for those dollars.
And we have to make college affordable for every American. No hardworking student should be stuck in the red. We've already reduced student loan payments to 10% of a borrower's income. And that's good. But now we've actually got to cut the cost of college.
More money in higher education has meant higher prices, more people enrolled in college, more water parks, more climbing walls, but we don't see more people with more of the skills and abilities that they need, but we do see a lot more people with debt.
Basic benefits should be just as mobile as everything else is today. That, by the way, is what the Affordable Care Act is all about. It's about filling the gaps in employer-based care so that when you lose a job, or you go back to school, or you strike out and launch that new business, you'll still have coverage.
Obamacare didn't reform our healthcare system. It just threw trillions of dollars at a dysfunctional system. Along the way, it threw 5 million people out of their health plans in 2013, threw another 1 million people out of their health plans in 2015, and it's going to keep causing the gaps in our healthcare sector to widen rather than fill them in.
The United States of America is the most powerful nation on earth.
It's true, we're the most powerful nation on earth by a large margin, and that's why we could cut the military budget. And that's why it's too bad that this president cut a deal undoing military spending cuts, the budget caps that were forcing real discipline on the Pentagon and finally causing some real reform.
Masses of fighters on the back of pickup trucks twisted souls plotting in apartments or garages, they pose an enormous danger to civilians. They have to be stopped. But they do not threaten our national existence.
I couldn't believe my ears. It's an American elected official acknowledging that America has been overreacting to the objective risk of terrorism. At a time in an election season when 1 in 6 Americans say the #1 problem facing the United States is terrorism, an American is more likely to be killed by an insect sting, falling furniture, or even a toddler who gets hold of a gun than by an Islamist terrorist.
We just need to call them what they are, killers and fanatics, who have to be rooted out, hunted down, and destroyed.
The ISIS threat is overblown. President Obama is right to point that out. ISIS is not 10 feet tall. They're not an existential threat to the United States. Terrorists want to terrorize us, and we play into their hands when we help them do that by inflating the threat. That causes us to have policies that are too broad, that cost too much, and that curtail our civil liberties unnecessarily.
And that's exactly what we're doing. For more than a year, America has led a coalition of more than 60 countries to cut off ISIL's financing, disrupt their plots, stop the flow of terrorist fighters, and stamp out their vicious ideology.
It's good that the president chose to highlight some of the non-military options that we've been pursuing against ISIS. Things like diplomatic efforts to end the Syrian civil war, things like economic embargoes preventing ISIS from exporting its oil or antiquities. But it's not so good that he chose to highlight the role of the US in a 60-member coalition of countries. In fact, a lot of those countries really aren't contributing much to the campaign at all, and it would be nice to see the Obama administration in their last year encourage these countries, particularly, say, the Gulf states, to contribute more to the campaign.
But on issues of global concern, we will mobilize the world to work with us and make sure other countries pull their own weight.
The president clearly chose to emphasize some of his administration's successes, and that's entirely understandable because they've actually had some big foreign policy successes, mostly in the realm of diplomacy. Things like the Iranian nuclear deal, a diplomatic agreement that will help to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. Things like lifting the Cuban embargo, a 50-year-old failed policy. And if there's been a strength that the Obama administration has had over the last 7 years, it's been a willingness to look at policies that are failing and try something different.
That's how we forged a Trans-Pacific Partnership to open markets and protect workers and the environment and advance American leadership in Asia. It cuts 18,000 taxes on products made in America, which will then support more good jobs here in America. With TPP, China does not set the rules in that region, we do. You want to show our strength in this new century? Approve this agreement. Give us the tools to enforce it.
It's good to see the president making a pitch for trade liberalization. Unfortunately, it's a little too little, a little too late. If the president is going to see the Trans-Pacific Partnership ratified by this Congress, he's going to have to work with Republicans because congressional Democrats are solidly opposed, and in no small part due to the president's failure to convince them of the merits of trade liberalization.
I believe we've got to reduce the influence of money in our politics so that a handful of families or hidden interests can't bankroll our election.
Our existing approach to campaign finance protects incumbents and harms challengers. If we want to shuffle people in and out of Washington, D.C., we need to free up campaign finance spending so we can dethrone incumbents.
How can we make our politics reflect what's best in us and not what's worse?
The very nature of politics puts us at each other's throats. If I'm going to get something, it means taking it from you. Politics turns us into enemies. It forces us to see each other not as partners, but as rivals. So politics can't make us better. Politics makes us worse.